Hello, everybody. Welcome to Monday Night Therapy. I'm here with Aaron Rostowski. I pronounced it right, didn't I? Wow. Yeah. We're starting out well. We are going to talk about baseball because you know what happened, Aaron. You know what happened.
Tell me, John. I want to hear it.
What happened was when the Big Ten baseball tournament began, there was a 15-2 drubbing of Nebraska by Ohio State. And we were run ruled, and all of social media, Facebook posts, Twitter, I'm not going to call it X. You know what they did, Aaron? You know what they did? They all began a simultaneous reenactment of Jesus Christ Superstar. They didn't want Will Bolt fired. They wanted him crucified, crucify him. And then everything worked out, and Nebraska is a Big Ten baseball champs for the first time in school history.
Indeed they are.
There you go. I got that off my chest. I've been waiting all day for that. But it was pretty, it pretty much was, oh my God, the screeching was incredible. And you are a baseball guy. I like to rant about baseball. I can yell, and pump my fist and stuff and go fire Will Bolt. But here's the thing. Was it Thursday we started or Wednesday?
Tuesday was the day we don't want to talk about, but we will.
Well, we will, because everybody was angry that Nebraska did not start. Come on, Brett Sears, the Big Ten Pitcher of the Year. Nebraska, just so everybody, if you haven't paid attention to Nebraska baseball, Brett Sears, Nebraska guy, Big Ten Pitcher of the Year. Will Bolt did not start him, and people were upset with this. And you are a guy that knows about pitching rotation and bullpen days. And tell us why it was a good idea to not start him. It all worked out, but tell us why at that time you kept saying he couldn't start him or he shouldn't start him.
Well, so the Big Ten tournament now starts. People remember back in the day when Van Horn would always say, you throw Jabba, you throw Komine the first day of the tournament all the time. And back then the tournaments started on Wednesday, which doesn't sound like a huge difference, but that's a big difference. Whereas the Big Ten tournament now starts on Tuesday. You're going from guys throwing on Thursday of the weekend before, which is already short rest, piling up because they used to be Friday starters the week before. So you're going on double short rest basically if you're throwing your ace out there. So Bolt's thinking, and the thinking that I agreed with was that, Brockett kind of got shelled a little bit up in Michigan State where he was pitching on Saturday. So he didn't really throw a whole bunch of pitches. So they kind of treated that like, oh, that's a bullpen day where if you're unfamiliar with bullpen days, basically the pitcher does their full warm-up, goes through the whole rigmarole, getting everything ready to go out and pitch, and then just kind of throws simulated 1 to 2, 3 innings in the bullpen against like live batters standing there acting like they swung or they got a hit off him, or they just go through a whole inning like that. So they're basically treating that what Brockett did as a bullpen day and saying, oh, that was just kind of getting them ready to start Tuesday. And so that's why they thought he would be the better arm, because Sears would have been on double short rest. He'd pitched, I think, 95 pitches, which would be even worse because Brockett threw maybe 30. So the wear and tear on his arm is just going to be a whole lot worse and a whole lot more to overcome to pitch on a Tuesday night versus when they did end up throwing him.
Okay, so basically for people that don't pay attention to baseball, and I honestly don't remember this stuff, but pitching is not a natural motion for a human.
No.
Okay, so when they throw pitches and they're throwing different types of pitches, fastball, curveball, whatever the hell they are, the more they throw, the more that they're working their arm up to the point that they're going to get injured because it's not a natural motion. And therefore they have to warm up before they're starting to throw at full velocity. And they have to not just keep throwing like that over and over and over.
Which we'll get to another reason why there was another spectacular performance later in the tournament. But yeah, guys nowadays are convinced that the best pitchers have the most velocity and the most spin rate on all their like curveballs, sliders, everything like that, and increasing your spin rate increases the pressure put on your arm. So they're just putting more and more and more pressure on their arm. So yeah, going short rest is not what you want to do with younger pitchers today.
So when we started this, you and I, well, okay, who started the argument with the firewheel bolt people last week? Was it me or you?
I think you made me aware of the post, and then I went after it hard for about a good 45 minutes. And then I saw you were on there.
I think that, realistically, let's take those people's perspective into view. Nebraska did lose some midweek games this season that we really didn't want to lose. We got swept by Creighton. Did Creighton make the NCAA tournament?
I can't see how they would. There were RPIs down in the 60s. I didn't get to watch the whole. It tanked at the end of the season.
So we lost to them, and everybody was pissed off about it. But they didn't even make their own postseason tournament, and they didn't make the NCAA tournament. So I realize we don't like losing to Creighton, but I think people in the future need to realize that Creighton plays us like we're their Super Bowl. They throw their best pitchers against us. Midweek games are typically for developing pitchers. It's not that they're not important. It's that this, and you can disagree with me or whatever. The guys had a kind of a point that, we shouldn't be losing these games. But my thing is this. I think earlier in the season, we looked at this and we said, okay, maybe we got an ace. And then we found another guy, and then we couldn't find a Sunday guy. But by the time the season the regular season came to a close, we are now looking at a Nebraska baseball team that not only is a Big Ten baseball champion, but they have a group of pitchers that they can kind of rely on. That's probably a more robust and a more well-rounded roster and a deeper roster than most of the teams they're probably going to face even from here on out. Is that correct or not?
Oh, definitely. People get on our bullpen a lot because, they saw those late inning collapses, but we were always in games where honestly our offense wasn't doing what they should have been doing. They weren't putting up the runs. We were scoring maybe 4 runs when they should be putting up closer to 7. And so if our bullpen would allow just a run or two even, then that becomes big news because, hey, we blew the game because we lost it 5-4 or 4-3. So even though you look at the guys that we played in the last, like even Indiana, who was the 3 seed going in, they made the tournament. We have probably 6 or 7 guys that could be their top ace closer in their back end of their bullpen. Our pitching depth is starting to rebound to where it was pre-COVID when they took out our whole season and then they took out our midweek games the next year, and that just kind of wiped out our depth. And so now we're kind of getting back to where we can have all these guys. Childress likes to pitch them for like an inning or two and then go on to the next guy in the midweek games. And then kind of when the stuff gets it gets really real at the end, he tries to bring in his closers and his actual guys that he wants pitching in the close games. And that's when you saw it kind of backfire a couple times and people got the unrest and pitchforks and.
Oh my God. I just, I kind of get it. Was the guy we were arguing with? He said that Will Bolt said he'd host a regional and he hasn't hosted a regional yet. Therefore he's failed, which, I don't necessarily disagree with, but this is a work in progress. Rob Childress is now a full-time coach. He wasn't before. He was a consultant or whatever, analyst. I think he made a huge difference in this season, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Will Bolt said he walked in on the first day that he was hired as a coach because you'd think that he would have helped Christie out. Bolt said that he didn't even talk to Christie about any pitching decisions, anything like that last year. And so when he walked in the first day, Will Bolt said he went up to all the pitchers in the group and said, we are going to lead the Big Ten in the fewest walks. He didn't say, like, our goal is to lead the Big Ten. He said right there, we're going to lead the Big Ten in the fewest walks. And they did it by leaps and bounds.
Did they really?
Oh, yeah.
And that's because Childress has the attitude that when you're pitching, you're throwing strikes. Is that right?
Yeah, he always comes up with all these. If you listen to the guys, he's got all these weird sayings. Like the one that I always remember, he says, you want to master the vanilla. So he wants guys that are just going to throw strikes, challenge people, and then not just kind of work on what their packages are. Like the previous pitching coaches that Erstad had, they kind of had their specialty in pitches. Like they wanted to always have everyone throw the sinker or work on throwing a slider. But Childress kind of has a masterful of all the pitches, figures out what guys are good at, maybe might tweak some stuff, but he figured out kind of the Indiana coach called it a pitching package, and I'm waiting for Fred Sacco to jump on that one. And so he says he's got their pitching package. Each one of them is different that comes in. So Indiana has a tough time preparing for Nebraska, unlike other teams, because other teams, you got to watch. Everyone throws a sinker. Everyone throws like a little cut fastball. But with Childress, everyone's got their own kind of specialty that they brought in. He might tweak them or introduce some different things, but they all kind of have their own little, like 2 or 3 pitch repertoire that they is different from everyone else on the team.
Let's take some comment. Charles Hellett, does a pitcher get one arm bigger than the other from so much use?
I never thought about that. Like, if you look like in tennis, all those guys have like giant arms that they swing the forehand with their racket. So
kind of like a guy that watches Pornhub a whole lot.
There you go.
Was it true? Do they? I don't know.
I know that Erstad always had and my family's fairly close with Erstad, so that's why I go back and I know more insides on there. He always had them working on making sure everything was more, even on each side. So like their plant leg wasn't giant compared to their other leg, and their throwing arm wasn't. He wanted all their like scores on flexibility and strength to be the same on each side.
Sam Matney asks, how many pitchers do you need to be considered deep? I think you got to have the proper answer to this is as many as possible. 30, but go ahead.
Yeah, you need 1 or 2 just like ace starters for sure. Just someone's got to start your week on the right foot every time, and then usually if you can have kind of 2 to 3 starters that can kind of flip in between being starters and being kind of long bullpen guys on the weekend. Like we had Christo at the end, kind of turned into the long bullpen guy, and then also started obviously at one of the games in the tournament and a couple games in the midweek, but they kind of found out he was better. So we kind of got him, and then we had like 3 or 4 guys, like Caleb Clark came along, Worthley came along, where they could throw 2-3 innings, which would eat up a whole bunch of time, where before we would have to throw like one guy in the 7th, one guy in the 8th, one guy in the 9th. So having this all different types of guys that can go for multiple innings helps your pitching staff be more efficient and deeper.
Well, let me ask you this again. You're the baseball guy. When a guy can only go 1 or 2 innings, why is that? I mean, like Brockett threw the first 9-inning no hitter since 1954. Yep. That guy could pitch 9 innings, and then you got another guy he can only pitch 2. Are they just weak? Is it pressure on their arm with the way they're throwing the ball?
Well, some guys can't. You can't go 100 miles an hour full bore if you're going to throw 9 innings. So, like you saw it with Sears when he came in to pitch the 9th inning of the championship game. He was throwing 2-3 miles per hour harder than he would in like his starts, because he didn't have to worry about going an extended time. He could just put everything he's got in every single pitch.
Oh.
And so some guys can dial it back like 10% and keep going, and those are kind of and you've got to stretch people out too. You can't just put some guy that's been throwing 20 pitches and say, hey, go throw 75 pitches now, and they won't be able to do it. So that's why Bolt likes to stretch guys out slowly. Start of the year, you're going to see guys throw 4 innings the first couple starts and then kind of work their way up. So
Drake B. Westfield gives us a $20 super chat. Thank you very much. Eric, those are always welcome. And he says, baseball from the Big Ten is underrated. And while I am not a Cornhusker fan, this was a valiant effort. And you always like to see the word valiant applied to your team, and an exciting conference championship for them. It is also excellent to see this, considering the departure of the athletic director. The Big Ten got 3 teams into the NCAA. Come on, Nebraska, Illinois, and Indiana.
Yep.
What do you think about that?
That sounds, if I was picking, that'd probably be what I would have done this year. Iowa just didn't have, in the past, they've always gone just straight RPI the past 3 years, which is, it's a metric that they use that it looks at all the records of your opponents and your opponent's opponents and grades them. And so you get a higher RPI for getting guys in like the top 25% versus the middle, and then kind of that's in quadrants. And so each quadrant, if you beat a team that's in the top quadrant, you get a whole bunch of RPI points. And so that's what they had been going on. But it seems like this year they were looking more all around, and because the RPI of our conference was the highest it's been in a long time. We were the 4th conference, and usually we're 6th. So we jumped the Sun Belt and the Pac-12 to get into there.
That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, when I saw that we were above the Pac-12 when I looked at it a couple weeks ago, that shocked me.
I don't think people understand that the Big Ten has been a fairly weak baseball conference for a long time, and they are rising. Penn State. Okay. Penn State, who I have railed against for God knows how many years about how loud for playing Elon 30 times a year and dragging the conference's RPI into the 300 range. Penn State was the 8th seed with a first-year coach, right?
Yeah, kind of a weird situation. He left his alma mater of Boston College, which you'd think Boston College isn't great. Penn State's not great, but they were clearly offering him more money to leave his alma mater. But he didn't even have that great of a record. He had like a 43 or 44% winning percentage. So I'm not sure where the two decided to get together, but it seems like it's working. They paid him the money, and I've got a couple quotes from him here. If I can find them, you can read that quick.
Charles Hullett says, wasn't it fairly recently we were talking about how Penn State's baseball team wasn't very good, and now this season they made the Big Ten. They made the Big Ten championship game. Yeah, I've been talking about how I have hated Penn State for years because I used to cover Big Ten, the Big Ten and Big 12 baseball. And when we moved to the Big Ten, you could see that Penn State didn't even try to have a baseball team, basically. They scheduled nobody hard. They didn't put any effort into it. And maybe what this is a symbol of is that Penn State is going to actually take baseball seriously, which would be a big boost to the conference because in the past they have drug everybody. Listen, when you go and beat a team and your RPI goes down, it's not good. And that's the problem with a lot of the Big Ten teams we've had in the past, is that we would beat somebody and we could sweep them 48,000 to nothing, and our RPI would still drop like a rock because they didn't do anything with their baseball team. That was Penn State up until now. What happens next? I think it's going to be very interesting to watch. How is that?
So, I agree, because it used to be when you'd look at the RPIs for the Big Ten, and someone would be in like the 50s or 60s, and then the next highest would be in like the 80s, and then you'd have a whole bunch kind of in the 150 to 200 range. Now, Penn State was, I think, the lowest for a while, like at 120. So it's really, the league is taking it seriously, other than Iowa, of getting their schedules bumped up. Luckily for Iowa, the RPI doesn't count if you go down to Division III or NAIA with your schedule. But
I don't know what they're doing over there. I thought Rick Heller would bring that team up, and it looks like he's just like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, they kind of fell into a couple big time recruits from in their neighborhood, basically fell into their lap, and they thought they could ride them to the College World Series this year, but they didn't really do anything. But I was in the press conference with the Penn State coach, and he said that the reason that he came to Penn State from Boston College was he met with the athletic directors, and they kind of basically said, hey, we're going to start taking this seriously. We're going to start investing more now that they're getting more money from the Big Ten Network and everything. So he's got the backing of that. He was able to land a big-time transfer in the Ciceri, I think is how you say his name, that guy that stole the home run in the last inning and was launching 400-foot bombs.
Okay, did they mention my name? Did they say
he didn't mention you specifically?
Did you say that son of a bitch at CornNation keeps abusing us, so we're going to do something about it?
Yeah, he said that the Big Ten's got a good group of coaches now, as good as they've had, and they and the players think that they're getting tired of being overlooked and disrespected. That he said this is not a 2-bid league, which is what it was looking like if you were just looking at RPI. So he said that next year he thinks with the influx of talent from the West Coast, this should be a 7-bid league.
Wow.
And that more and more programs like Penn State, he said, is starting to put a lot more investment into their baseball, and you're seeing that across the board pretty much.
Oh my God. You know what that's really going to happen is Firewell Bolt going to come right back into fashion really quick. Aaron Keene says, is the Firebolt crowd, aka Barabbas crowd, quiet now though? There wasn't really a whole lot of comments after we won the Big Ten championship, but
I put my official sign off from leaving the Big Ten tournament was, oh yeah, and Firewell Bolt in all capital letters, and I thought a couple of them would be like, well, you should have been there, and I didn't get anything.
Yeah. I think they'll always be there because I think that there's a lot of people in Nebraska. There's a lot of people in Nebraska that have very high expectations for the football team. But I think that there's also a group of very hardcore baseball fans, some of which think Nebraska should be in the College World Series every year. I don't know why that is. Now, do I think Nebraska should be in the top 2 teams of the Big Ten? Yeah, I think that's where we belong. Maybe not every season, but that's where, if we're not there on a consistent basis, then you need to start thinking about probably changing directions. But that certainly isn't this year.
Well, the thing you got to remember with Bolt is he was there through the transition. He was there through COVID and all that crap that the Big Ten put baseball teams through. B, he was there for the transition of the transfer portal, NIL, all that kind of stuff. So after he won the conference championship, his first conference championship, after he won his first conference championship, he came back and thought he's going to build his team the old way, where you bring in just a whole mash of freshmen and win it that way, and maybe like 2 or 3 transfers. And that obviously didn't work, as Purdue put their tarp out and we stayed at home from the Big Ten tournament. And so the next year he's like, well, we can't do that. We got to get older. So he went out and got he tried to get a whole bunch of portal transfers, and he got a few of them, but he said, I think it was after the Ohio State game, that there was a whole lot of big name transfers that he fell short on. And so he kind of decided, well, that's not really worth our time to keep going that route. And so he figured out this year that everyone's going nuts because the transfer portal's new and shiny, and everyone's going nuts for that. You can get the Tommy guy that's down at LSU came in and was like $1 million baseball player down there. Well, he figured out you can go to JUCO. No one's looking at JUCOs anymore. Oh. So he signed the number 1 JUCO class in the country with guys like Silva, McConaughey, Stone, all those guys, and Overbeek, guys that are huge parts of this team. He got basically just with his old JUCO connections that no one even looks at anymore. So Bolt's not sitting there, gee whiz, why isn't my way working? And like kind of like the Bo Pelini method and keep firing back, trying to do the same thing over and over again. That's the main reason that I like Will Bolt. He learned from his mistakes. He's not keeping his friends around. He got rid of Christie, who's one of his best friends.
Yeah.
He got rid of him.
What is he doing now?
He is a pitching coach. I forget where he went though. But so yeah, Bolt's not, he loves Husker baseball. That's his whole life. That's what he's wanted. He wants it to be as good as he can. He's not going to bolt, so to speak, like the last couple of guys that won the conference championship. Maryland's coach and Michigan's coach, both in the ACC and SEC now. He's not going to do that.
Okay, Drake B. Westfield gives us another $5 super chat and asks, on a different note, has Todd stepped away from the show? I always liked his insight and perspective. I asked because I have not been here for a while. Yes, he has. I don't know if he'll be back, but for right now and probably for the entire offseason at least, yes, he has stepped away from the show. Wade Farr says, why does the Big Ten disrespect Nebraska? On the Big Ten channel, the listed Penn State against Michigan, then colors for Big Ten Network and Big Ten Championship are blue and white, no red. Do you know what he means?
Well, the Big Ten uses, as far as the last part, blue and white is their conference colors, so that's why all the stuff is blue and white. But I didn't get to see much of the, like the TV was on above us, but I couldn't really see what was going on, all the pregame stuff in the press.
I did watch TV. I thought, I don't know. I enjoyed the announcers. Baseball's a slow sport. It's kind of I think they had banter between them that was kind of just dumb guy talk, and it wasn't horrible. It was interesting most of the time.
Yeah, they played their audio for us most of the time. And they weren't too bad. Kugler's one of my all-time favorite baseball TV guys for like lower level, so I missed him. But yeah, I thought the Connor Onion or whatever his name was, he was pretty good. I enjoyed him.
All right, let's see. We did that one. Sam Matney, one of the famous Matneys, says, what is RPI? Is it similar to the NET or net ranking in basketball?
Sort of. It's just a ranking system for quadrants. So the more you beat the top one quadrants, the higher your team is. And if you lose to like a lower quad 4 loss, that's going to be the most detrimental to your RPI. So like Iowa schedules a bunch of quad 4 teams, and even though they beat them, you don't get your RPI doesn't go up very much. So Nebraska was scheduling teams like Grand Canyon this year and who made the tournament, and College of Charleston made the tournament, I think. I know they got real hot at the end of the year, and then like going to playing Oklahoma and Baylor and Texas Tech in that opening tournament. Just we had the number 10 strength of schedule out of conference in the entire country. So that really boosts up your RPI.
I think, what was I going to, the RPI used to be, how do I phrase this? A few years ago, the problem that the cold weather teams had is that there was no benefit or there was no adjustment for losing on the road. Was that it? Because in baseball, the sport starts in February. So, and it didn't used to have a common weekend or a common start date, but now it does. That helped the northern schools or the cold weather schools. The RPI was adjusted. So if you lose on the road, it didn't hurt you as bad because all the northern schools have to mostly start in warm weather areas. They start most of their seasons on the road, and you can choose to schedule tough opponents. Like I think Rutgers plays Miami every year. Maryland and Rutgers maintain a lot of their ACC foes because, those are great games for them. Nebraska typically plays in some tough tournaments. And then Iowa plays, I don't know, probably Loras or Loris. And I don't know. You know what? You can choose whether you're going to play a tough schedule or not play a tough schedule. And the problem has been in the Big Ten in the last 15 years, let's say, that there are some schools that just don't play a tough schedule, and it really hurts the RPI going forward.
So it used to be the northern schools. I mean, for midweek games, it's hard to schedule southern schools with good that'll help your RPI out. So it's something that you've got to, like Nebraska would schedule UNO for 3 games, South Dakota, North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Northern Colorado. You're not going to boost your RPI doing that. So they started to go back and get Kansas State and Kansas, teams like that to come up a little bit farther away. And then stuff like that's going to help your RPI a lot more. And so that's why we were up in I think we ended up at 31, 32, somewhere in there, instead of last year somewhere 60 to 70 with all the UNOs and everything, and especially losing to UNO and Creighton.
Paul Dallin says of the 4 teams joining the Big Ten next year, only Oregon made the tourney. Well, if you watch the show I did with the USC guy, Tim Prangley, he said that, USC has won more championships than anybody else, but that was a while ago.
Oh, yeah. It was 70s.
Yeah, but they're trying to get back to that. And, it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward because now let's get to Minnie. Minnie says, Rostowski, are you going to Oklahoma this weekend?
I have a wedding to go to with someone that I've worked with forever and ever and ever, that there's no way that I would be able to skip that, and she'd murder me. That's all I can say. I'd be dead, so it wouldn't be worth it.
Okay, let's go back to the Big Ten tourney games. Which one of these games made you the most nervous?
Oh, probably the second Indiana one, even though I knew they had no pitchers left. We pulled – you guys couldn't see it in the first Indiana game that day, but Drew Christo got up starting in the 3rd inning and threw probably 20 pitches an inning each time, because Will and Rob Childress were scared that – because right around the 3rd inning is when Will Walsh kind of got into some trouble, and then he just went on a tear of like 14, 15 guys in a row. But they just kept telling Christo, all right, it's our inning, step up, get warm just in case we need you, because you never know. And Walsh finished the game, and Christo pitched probably 75 pitches, 80 pitches just in the bullpen, and then came back and had to start that next game. Bolt said he told him to go home, take a shower, sit in the AC, and then tell me how you felt in the like 20, 30 minutes before they were getting ready to warm up. And he said, it's going to be my ball. And so he took the ball and gave it to him. And Bolt said, I honestly had no idea how it was going to go, but that's probably something that most people on TV or listen to the radio had no idea, unless you were in the stadium watching the bullpen. And so that was going to be one of my questions for him. And then whoever asked him the first questions, he went off on that tangent right away about saying that was one of the most impressive pitching outings he's seen just because of that.
Oh my God, I had a question. It just went away. Penn State. What about Penn State? The championship game, I was like, I work with a guy who's a Penn State guy, and he gives me all sorts of shit about Penn State. And, it's the weekend, and he sends me a chat over our work chat. He's good luck. I think it's sarcastic, but I'll find out tomorrow. I'll be able to tell him to, But that game kind of made me like, it's one pitch. I hate pitchers duels.
Oh yeah.
I hated them. I hated them when I was a photographer, because nobody scores. You get no plays anywhere. All you get is pitching and the guy taking swings. It's the worst thing to photograph in the world. But that game made me extremely tense, even though I was sure we were going to win. But
it was definitely tense. I figured we'd eventually get to Linsman, because he'd thrown – that was the 4th straight appearance he'd thrown on short rest. So I figured he would eventually wear down. He's real emotional, just like his older brother was, who was in the stands.
Oh, really?
And so I knew he would he looked good early because he can get up for any game. And so I knew he'd look good early. I didn't think he'd be perfect through the first time through order, but he went from striking guys out where we weren't even touching the ball the first time through to we started kind of hitting the ball into play, semi-hardly getting some outs. And then third time through, that's when we started to actually pick him up. And the Penn State coach said that after about the second or third outing of Linsman's of this year, he went up to Linsman and he said, "You and me are the only people that are going to decide when you're pitching and when you're not pitching this year." So he said, I'm going to walk up to you if I need you. I'm going to ask you, are you going to pitch? And you're going to tell me yes or no, you can go that day. And then once you're in there, you're going to tell me when you're done. And so he said Linsman told him, he just sent him a text like the night before. He said, "Is it your ball?" And Linsman texted him back, "My ball." And so he said that's all they discussed about it. And then he didn't talk to him the whole game until finally after that seventh inning, when he was kind of starting to get knocked around a little bit, he came out and stood on the top step for a second and just looked at the coach and said, "I'm done."
Wow.
And so that's when they brought in the reliever. There's number 2 or 3 starter, I forget which.
Okay, are pitchers the most freaky people in sports, or what's the deal?
Well, they still get to have success on more than like 30% of their like batters. If you hit 300, you're doing good. So batters, they always come up with weird hocus pocus stuff to get themselves going. And so I'd go hitters more so than pitchers.
Oh, Drew Christo. Now he's been, what is he? Is this his last year?
He is a junior right now.
Okay.
So he should be back.
He had very high, I don't want to say hopes. He had very high expectations when he came in. I don't think he did much for 2 years. This year, he seems like he's really, I don't know. You see him. I guess you watched him pitch in the tournament, and he had a certain, just a, kind of like a meanness, or kind of like I'm fuck you motherfuckers, I'm taking this game over kind of attitude about him. Have you noticed that, or is that just, what do you think? How Drew Christo has progressed? Yes or no?
Oh, most definitely. He was the number 1 recruit in the Big Ten his freshman year, and just failed miserably every single time they put him out there. So last year they put him in slightly more often, did good his first couple times, and then just kind of fell off the face of the earth again. And so this year they had worked on him with a couple more pitches with Childress, and so they said, all right, he's going to be kind of our, if not our ace, our number 2 guy. And so they put him on the Saturday starts, and he was kind of the team leader and everything like that, but worked pretty good for a couple weeks, and then just kind of slowly started to tail off to where they went and got Walsh for a couple weeks, and then found Brockett after that no-hitter. And so they were trying to figure out what to do, and then it was finally Minnesota where they kind of gave him that, all right, you're going to go and pitch maybe 2-3 innings tops as kind of a long reliever, so go after it. And so that's when he really started to catch fire, was up in Minnesota in this new role.
What? Okay. What are you people in the chat? What's this crap about show notes? We didn't do any show notes for this. I will make notes to myself sometimes, but I don't make the things like Minnie does. I'm not that organized. Now, I do come up with, normally when I interview people, I do come up with a list of questions. And the reason for that is if I get trailed off in some direction, I can pull myself back into where we're supposed to be going. But for this one, no, I don't need it. We didn't do any show notes. Maybe we should have. What else do we have to say about our baseball team? And what am I missing?
Well, it's definitely nice that our offense finally showed up in the Big Ten. That's kind of what I expected them to be for the majority of the year. With Josh Caron setting a record, hitting 6 home runs in the tournament, and Bolt said at breakfast that morning, he walked up to Josh and said, "Hey, I've already seen Dan Johnson hit 5 home runs in a tournament. Why don't you hit 6?" And so he went out and hit his 6th one that day. Bolt's always got some funny story about stuff like that.
This is the guy that was the MVP of the entire tournament.
Yep.
And he wasn't selected to any of the 3 all-conference
Not
teams.
a one of them.
And you know what? My family was really tired of hearing that. They started giving me, both my wife and my rotten son, by the end of the time, were giving me tons of shit about the whole conference catcher thing. He's up for the Buster Posey Award. Is that the right one?
Yep, he's a semifinalist to that. So one of the top 16 catchers in the country.
And
it is, I will say, it is the best year in the Big Ten for catchers in probably 5-6 years. They've got one of the guy that I thought should have been first team. He was second team. Was Penn State's catcher who hits like .423, which is number 2 or 3 of any position in the country. And then there's Illinois' catcher who is kind of like a Josh Karen. I thought Karen and him should have been 2 or 3 based on that.
James Boardman says Nichols and Kansas State made the tournament as well. Nebraska is 10-3 against tournament teams. That's kind of impressive, I would say.
Absolutely.
And then Wade Farr asked, why was the championship game at 10 a.m.? I'm sure more people would have gone to a 5 p.m. game, but would Nebraska still have one at a 5 p.m. game? Do you want to answer those?
So, yeah, they originally scheduled it for 2 p.m., and then they looked and saw the biggest thing for baseball tournaments is always weather. They looked and saw that there was a possibility of a storm coming through at 2 or 3 o'clock. And so they said, well, let's just – and they've moved this championship game up probably 3 times in the past, 5-6 years. So they have they moved it up just because they didn't want to have to pause because pitchers are already kind of beat up by the end of the tournament. They wanted to move it up just so that they wouldn't have to stop and have new pitchers warm up and lose the momentum and everything like that. So that's why they moved it up. But yeah, it probably would have been. It was 13,300 was the attendance. They didn't open up the bleachers. Last year they opened up the bleachers one game and got 17,000 in there. I'm guessing we would have been closer to that.
God, see, I had a thought and it went away. This is what happens when you get old, Aaron.
I'll tell you, I did have a let me see if you might have started. No, you didn't. I did have a pre-production meeting with Angela Matney earlier today. She wanted me to go over how she put a comment in here to go over how the tournament works in the NCAAs.
Oh, okay.
So it's Nebraska. If you win your conference tournament, most of the time that's the team that gets an automatic bid to get into the NCAA tournament, which is at the end of that's the College World Series. And so you've got your automatic qualifiers there, and then teams like Indiana, Illinois get the at-large bids. And so you've got your 64 teams that they split up into 16 regionals. So there's basically 4 teams in each region that go through and play like a double elimination tournament, kind of like the first week of the College World Series. It's that same format. And if you are lucky enough to get out of there, then you're one of the final 16 teams. You play whichever team's across from you in the bracket in a best 2 out of 3. And the winner of that 2 out of 3 gets to come to Omaha for the College World Series. And then you start all over again. So Bolt says each weekend you got a hiccup. We just took ours a little earlier in this past weekend. So he's hoping they don't do that again. But if they do, they've got the pitching to back out of it. They've proven that to us. So no Firewell Bolts if they lose to Florida, and B themselves.
Wait a minute. We got to do a different one first. Aaron Keene with the "I had a thought and it went away" guy who doesn't need show notes. You know, I love you guys so much. I won't ban you. Aaron Scott Schrader says, Aaron, what do you think about Nebraska's matchup with Florida?
Florida is kind of like a one-man team. I don't know if you remember last year they were in the College World Series. They had 2 or 3 other guys that were first, second, third round picks in the MLB draft. They had Wyatt Langford ended up being the number 3 overall pick. He was their ace pitcher and hit something like 30 home runs and hit, I think, 4 or 5 in Omaha. He was something to watch. And his kind of, if he was Batman, his Robin was the guy that's their star now. And I always get his last name wrong, so I got to look it up. Jack Caglione.
Caglione. That's a hell of a name.
And so he is now their Friday night pitcher. And so his ERA is 4.35, which is decent. And so, but he's a good pitcher. He's a great hitter. He's got 29 home runs on the year. And I think there was one point he hit 7 in a row, if I remember that streak correctly. And they're not just getting over the wall. They're over the light towers.
So basically, we have to beat one guy.
Yeah, because for a while there, they were sub 500, and the NCAA, they've always been still ranked in the top 10 in the country. And people were starting to wonder if the NCAA was going to take a team with a sub 500 record. Luckily, they won just one game enough that they didn't have to figure that out, if that was
really
going to be a stipulation. Because, their record is 28-27.
Okay.
13-17 in the SEC.
That SEC gets so much, I don't know, benefit of the doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of a screw job. I'm going to go ahead.
They've got a lot of guys that have, like, I think Karen's our top home run hitter now at 15. They've got 29 there, and then 13, 13, 13, 18, 14. So they can definitely change the game in a hurry. So that's going to be the main concern for us, is not letting the home run ball beat us. So
basically, it's going to be power, and they're not going to do much small ball stuff.
Oh, yeah, because they have exactly 2 guys hitting 300 or better. They don't hit the ball very well at all to move guys around. They're all about slugging.
Wow. Okay. What about Oklahoma State and the other? Oh, you haven't looked at those yet, have you?
Not really. I know they've got a couple good hitters. I forget their names. Oh, Schubart. That's their best guy. He's another guy that's got 20 home runs. Slugs 813, which means every time he steps up to bat, he's basically gets 0.8 of a base each time he steps up to bat, which is ridiculous. I think our best guy is hitting slugging 600.
Okay. For the last 10 minutes of the show, I'm going to ask you to speculate along with me.
All right.
Okay. Because last week I did a video about this, and I did an article about this. Last week, the NCAA voted to settle the House case, the lawsuit that's the big antitrust lawsuit. And what that means, and this all needs to be approved by courts, and I'm going to talk about this because I want you guys to think about this. Nobody seems to be talking about this, and I don't know if people don't care about it. It's the most monumental change in the history of college sports. In 2025, oh, what are you doing right now?
I forgot I was going to rub that in your face.
Oh, my God.
Sorry, continue.
Yeah, see, this is right, and now I don't have notes. Anyway, in 2025, college athletes are going to begin to be paid for the first time ever. I mean, they, legally paid. And I don't think anybody is really there. I don't see people discussing this. I don't see people talking about it. But I want you to think about this for a minute. There will be a salary cap that each team that this is not something that teams or schools have to do, but it's something they can do, which really means if you're going to be serious about competing for championships, you are going to have to pay your athletes. And this is separate from NIL, nil. This is, the transfer portal is still the transfer portal, but each school will be paying from basically about $17 million to $22 million every year to players, to athletes. And I want you to think about this. How are they going to divvy that up? Think about this all across, there are 22 sports in Nebraska.
Yep.
Okay. You're competing in the Big Ten because that's still a thing. And you're thinking that, let's take Northwestern. If Northwestern, the distribution of how you pay the money is up to each school. Northwestern just lost the women's lacrosse championship to Boston College this weekend. Do you think for a moment that it will make any difference if Northwestern pays their football players, or would they be better off giving more money to more women's lacrosse players? You get what I'm getting at? How are you going to if you're a guy that's running an athletic department, these are the decisions.
Do you want to put all your chips in one spot to still not do great, or put them in other spots where you can dominate the landscape?
Right. You could easily say at Nebraska, well, you couldn't. You could easily say that, okay, we're going to spend all our money on football. And the first thing we're going to do as Nebraska fans is say, the fuck you are. We have a volleyball team that regularly wins championships, you shitheads. You're not spending it all on football. Okay. Well, what about baseball? What about the women's softball team? What about, is there going to be enough nil money to make up, or NIL money to make up the differences? That these are unbelievably complex stuff that's going to happen in a year. So now Paul brings up this point. State employees can't take in nil money. It goes from looking like money laundering to looking like bribery. There is that kind of a thing where, but they're not state employees yet, Paul. That's the thing about it. They're just going to be paid like employees, but they're not going to be ruled to be employees. That's the next step down the road. And I got to wonder that now that I'm talking about it this way, that most people aren't paying attention to it, because holy shit, this is a lot of complexity going into college sports, isn't it?
Yeah. That's why, that's why I'm still with Bolt on that. I'm not going to yell at him for trying to navigate through all this landscape, and because A, we don't barely know what's happening right now. B, we have no idea what's going to happen a year from now. Yeah. We're barely able to keep up with what we're seeing right now. So it's interesting.
You look at other schools. Nebraska's never been a big basketball school. Are we just going to go, well, we're not really going to try as much here? Are you going to spread it across the board? This stuff is amazingly going to be difficult to figure out, because you're going to have to figure it out balancing your 22 sports with Penn State's 24 sports and with Ohio State's 638 sports, and what are they all going to be doing? Paul Dallin says somebody's getting rich, somebody's going to jail. I don't think so. The lawyers are in charge of all of this. Maybe some lawyers will go to jail over this, but there's certainly going to be some people getting rich. And I think the other thing that I thought about this is, pro athletes. Antonio Brown filed bankruptcy. The man has made $80 million. He's also spent a lot of his time not bothering to ever pay anybody what they were owed, which is why he's probably going bankrupt. But you look at the number of pro football players that make millions upon millions of dollars, and they still go broke because they have no idea what to do with their money. They're buying Lambos and they think it's cool. What the hell are they going to do with college kids doing that? My God, this just looks like what this looks like, Aaron? This looks like you and I could make a lot of money being like financial. Let me help you with your finances, young man. That kind of thing. No, I'm not a fiduciary. The kind of fiduciary I am doesn't need to be registered with anybody.
Because I hear that guys over in Colorado are declaring bankruptcy too.
Oh my God, that was the other news. Was it Shiloh Sanders?
Yeah.
If you guys didn't hear this, Shiloh Sanders apparently, how many years ago? 2015.
That sounds about right, I think.
Beat up a security guard. The security guard he was told, Deion Sanders, his father, told the security guard to take his son's phone away from him. I don't know why he didn't do it himself, probably because his lack of toes, he couldn't keep up with him or something. And Shiloh Sanders ends up beating up the security guard and permanently disabling and injuring him. And the guy wins a just multi-million-dollar lawsuit against Shiloh Sanders, and Shiloh Sanders declares bankruptcy, and therefore he doesn't have to pay it. But now Shiloh Sanders is getting NIL money, and he's probably going to go into the pros. And you can't do this forever. Those people are such just the Sanders family is just such a icky, kind of like Luka Doncic or whatever his name is that plays for Dallas. Big
Doncic.
Dumb bitch. Is that it? Whiny. My God, he is a child. I have tried to watch the NBA, Aaron. You know what I've discovered? I really hate the NBA. Okay.
I have a hard time. I love Doncic, but Kyrie Irving is just probably one of my top 5 least favorite human beings, and I have to root for him every other day, and it kills me. I'd rather cheer for Deion Sanders than cheer for Kyrie Irving.
Wow. Okay, Aaron Keene says lawyers are in charge. What could go wrong? Well, they bill by the hour, and there's a lot of them. That's the thing about it. I'm in IT, and we take part of when you look at the nation's economy, IT takes a good chunk of it. You have to pay IT people because we're everywhere. We're in everything. But I always compare IT to the law firms like this. I always say, IT has made itself more productive where we have to use less and less programmers to do the same amount of work. Lawyers, law firms, when they sue people, they never look at you and go, well, we could use 18 lawyers on this, but we're only going to use 7. They never do this. So they're actually pretty much geniuses. Fred Sacco says the only certainty I can say about this is that John will never send Greg a t-shirt. I might need to furnish my whole staff with t-shirts because we're doing videos, for God's sakes, and I realized we need to rep ourselves with my t-shirts. And even right now, I'm wearing the
one you stole from me.
No, what I stole from you was a Gordon shirt. This is from the year before where I pushed you out of the way and got this K shirt. Husker Bob says, you mean Ernie Chambers was right after all? Yes, apparently that's true. All these years he said we should be paying players, but thank God he's still alive to see the day come. I haven't heard anything about him. Husker Chuck says, I heard Ernie Chambers was born in 1860. Is he a vampire? I always loved the guy. You
gotta have someone in there that just kind of screws up everyone, and
he was always a firebrand. He was always he was always fun and interesting. And now he's right about college sports. Okay, James Boardman, shit ass nation shirts. I should make those.
I could be wearing our flag as a cape right now, I guess.
Angela Matney says, Aaron, why the Kyrie Irving hate?
Because he's the worst teammate in any sport that I've ever seen. He thinks the earth is flat. He refused to get a vaccine to be able to play in his home stadium.
Right.
So
that's right.
He would only play, I think it was 40 games that year because he couldn't play at his home stadium. He couldn't go up to Canada and play the Raptors. So he was taking money for just playing 40 games. And then he told Boston basically to screw off after he said he'd be there forever. 2 days later, he told him screw off and went and signed somewhere else. I don't even remember. But he's just a terrible human being.
Highlander Gun says he's talking to Fred, responding to Fred, but I'm going to respond to Highlander Gun. I'm getting me a Sharpie and making my own CornNation t-shirt. You're going to be sued. I'll come after you for that. I know lawyers. There you go. Remember when Ernie sued God? I think he did, didn't he? Was that a thing? Pepperidge Farm.
He put that motion out there.
Okay. Is there anything else that we need to cover?
Oh, not that I can think of. My brain is just dead after this whole week. It's a hell of a week, but it's a lot of work.
It is. It's a lot of, it's a lot of fun going to the games, and it's a lot of, it's interesting. When I was a photographer, I mean, you go to the games and you'd be there for one time I shot the Big Ten wrestling tournament. I was from there from 8 a.m. till midnight, and then it came back at 8 o'clock in the next morning. That is a lot of work. It's an amazing amount of fun, and I love doing it, but I don't think I could do it anymore anyway. Yeah, okay. And
then I go down and sit in one of those press conferences, and it's fun. It's fun, and also kind of recenters you seeing all these guys knowing, hey, that could have been the last time they ever played baseball for real, sitting in a press conference with me, and after getting done bawling their eyes out, basically.
Minnie says if John makes a shit ass shirt, I'd buy it and send it to Greg. That kind of seals the deal, doesn't it? Okay, Angela Matney says, I once saw a CornNation t-shirt at the thrift store, and I went back the next day to buy it and already sold. Well, that's a good idea. Here, I was supposed to, here you go. I should have been running this throughout the store. I'm a lousy marketer. Okay, we're mostly rambling on now, aren't we?
And I know ESPN Plus will have all the games for sure. I'm not sure what they'll actually put on ESPN or ESPN2 or whatnot. I have ESPN Plus, so I'm usually watching all these games at like midnight from Long Beach State and everything. So, yeah, if you want to watch a whole lot of baseball for the next couple of weeks, ESPN Plus.
Vince Watson, John, any chance of getting many a press pass, a credential for the Colorado game? You know what? We might try that, but I am guessing that is going to be damn difficult because we're kind of down the pecking order, right? So what happens is if shit tons of national outlets file for credentials in Nebraska, they only have so much room to seat you. And if you're at the bottom of the pecking order, and you know that there's going to be unbelievable crap tons of national people going to the Nebraska-Colorado game. So, oh my God, look at this. How Minnie says, Vince, you are my new BFF. Oh, I thought that meant boyfriend. I thought, wow, this doesn't take much. Okay, we should probably leave before. Oh, wait, here we go. Well, one thing that was announced over the weekend is that the Big Ten baseball tournament will be staying in Omaha until 2027.
Yep, but they have not said what their plan is for the next year's tournament. I'm guessing they're going to wait and talk to everyone when the new teams get on board and kind of talk through that and see what their ideas are.
Well, Omaha's right in the middle of the country, so
yeah, Omaha's about as good a place, for the 13,000 and 10,000 the day before that and 6,000 every other day, pretty much. We didn't get that when we were up at Target Field that year, and we didn't get that we got the one day at Bart Kaufman in Indiana. We got probably, 7,000 fans, but that's why the Big Ten wants to keep coming back to Omaha. And then, yeah, with all these West Coast teams, might as well have it right in the middle.
James Boardman says, Aaron, have you heard anything about the Big Ten playoff schedule for next year? 12 teams. Can they really expand it? I don't think they can expand it, can they?
I think they have to. I don't think, because we'll have 17 teams. I don't think you can take less than half the teams into a tournament. So, like the SEC, you have your 4 teams basically start where we would right now. And then the other next 8 teams have a 1-game playoff on Monday to get into the Tuesday tournament. So basically you'd be bringing a whole bunch more teams to Omaha, so 12, and 4 of them would go home right away that Monday night, and then we'd basically start the tournament as we know it that Tuesday. So I'm thinking that might be what they end up doing.
Okay, one more. This is it. And then we're going to go. Tiger Shark Diver says, if we don't re-sign that contract for the College World Series, Omaha is in trouble. Is this an issue?
It's never going to be an issue. That Mecca will always hold out to try and get more money from the NCAA, but they're never going to crack and let it go anywhere else ever. That's why we have a new stadium down there instead of on the spot where Rosenblatt was. They didn't even want 1 year for it to go anywhere else, because then you'd have someone else in a bidding war.
Aaron Keene, I'm going to let that comment go because John needs to start making CornNation salsa. You know, I went to Shields today because yesterday my son and I went, not the rotten son, the good son. Oh my God, I'm sounding like Deion Sanders where I'm ranking my kids. I need to get some counseling or something. But yesterday, my oldest son and I went fishing, and we caught a few bass and stuff. And in late June, I'm going to go to Canada and go fishing. And I realized that I need to look at my gear. And today we went to Shields, and I realized after I was there, and he bought a new rod and reel, and I looked at my reels, and he looked at me and he said, "You've had those reels my entire life." And I realized that I really need to get some new fishing reels. That's the end of the show. All right. That is the end of the show. Thank you, Aaron, for showing up and talking about baseball with us. One thing you all should know is this. I am going to try to interview people throughout the off season. There are times at which I will not be able to interview people live. So I will be recording these. Sometimes I'll use them on a Monday night as premieres, which YouTube, you can do premiere shows. And that means the video is shown at a specific time with chat active. It all depends on play it by ear going forward, and we'll just see what happens. I mean, I pretty much played Highlander Gun has this right. Ramblings by John. That's pretty much been my life story. I used to do a lot of public speaking, and that's pretty much what it was too. Okay. Thank you everybody for your support. Take care of yourselves, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Aaron. And good night.
Good night, John. Good night, everybody.